I beat Baldur's Gate 3. Oh my gosh! Thank you guys so much. I didn't expect this at all. Seriously, thank you. I had so much fun adventuring around Faerun, facing many trials and tribulations, and making tons of clutch decisions to get out of perilous situations. However, you spend a lot of time in menus in that game. Like hours upon hours. If I could change one teeny tiny thing to make my experience even better, it would be to have a giant second touchscreen on my lap where I could access my inventory, map, and character sheet. That way, I could easily and conveniently manage my items and equipment, make marks and notes on the map, and have easy access to all of my spells and abilities. You know, we used to have something kind of like that. It was called the Nintendo DS. I remember it like it was yesterday. During E3 in 2004, then Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aimé was up on stage and he yanked that little sucker out of his jacket pocket.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS.
And just like that, handheld gaming changed forever. Oh, sorry, I was just daydreaming about dual screening. There really is no downside to having dual screens. When I say dual screens, you might be thinking to yourself, you mean like having your phone out watching a YouTube video guide while you play a game? Or using a 2-monitor PC setup? Well, those are both great and have their purposes. What I'm talking about is full second screen integration, where the game is designed to utilize the second screen to make the overall experience more convenient and accessible. Having a map or a guide up on a second screen while you play a game is totally fine, but you, as the player, are responsible for triangulating everything to make sure it lines up with what's going on in your specific playthrough. Having a second screen harmonize with the gameplay makes the experience more streamlined and easier to manage. Also, and I think this goes without saying, in the ideal dual screen setup, at least one, if not both screens are touch sensitive. The Nintendo DS was one of the first successful mainstream consoles to have a touchscreen. It was also one of the main selling points. And a lot of games that utilized it had their gameplay elevated in unique and creative ways. FYI, if you couldn't tell, this will be a very Nintendo heavy video, because Nintendo is the only company to implement second screen integration in a successful way. Besides the DS and Wii U lines, there haven't ever really been other consoles that encourage developers to use the secondary touchscreen to help enhance their game. The top reason why I want dual screens is the convenience. I'm gonna be real with you guys. My number one weakness is maps. I have a really hard time memorizing a map or remembering where to go. I often find myself opening the map in a game multiple times before I get to my destination. A lot of games have this thing called a mini-map that hangs out in one of the corners. These are definitely nice, but they only offer a small glimpse of the immediate area. There is a delicate balancing act between keeping the UI readable, but also not taking up too much visual real estate. Usually, if you want to access your full-size map, you have to effectively pause, bringing the game to a screeching halt so you can see where you need to go. With a true dual screen setup, this is something you never have to worry about. You can have your map up all the time, and even have an indicator on the map that shows where you are in real time. This is actually something a lot of developers did with their games on the dual screen systems. For instance, let's take a look at a franchise that existed both on single screen and dual screen consoles. Animal Crossing. Do you remember when Animal Crossing was everywhere for a while? I sure do. I've been an Animal Crossing fan since the very beginning, and seeing the most recent game in a previously niche series blow up was a pleasant surprise. I'm gonna be talking about that big one, New Horizons, as well as its sibling, New Leaf. Animal Crossing New Horizons was designed with one screen in mind. You do have access to a small mini-map on the bottom, and you can pop your inventory up on the screen, but in order to access either of these, you have to effectively pause the game by bringing up your menu, which is a cell phone in this game. I will admit, it's nice that the menu is just an overlay, but once you navigate your cursor to the icon you want, the entire game screen is filled with a menu that usually features a load time. Each time you want to change the menu, you have to back out and select another icon. This can become very time-consuming in a game like Animal Crossing, where you need to be constantly accessing your menus. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, the top screen features the gameplay, and the bottom screen features the menus. You can actually click through these in real time and choose what you want displayed on the bottom screen, like the map or your inventory, so you don't forget what you have in your pockets. And you can manage it easily using the touchscreen. You can do all of this without pausing and interrupting your game. Honestly, I could easily see the Nook phone from New Horizons being implemented in a similar way if the Switch had a second touchscreen display. You could click the icons like apps on a phone, which in my opinion would make the game even more immersive. Immersion is an often overlooked feature of the dual screen setup. Inventory and map management are definitely a convenience, but having a cohesive art style and presentation can really pull you into the world you're being asked to inhabit. Sometimes just having that second screen feels like you're holding a prop from that game. If you've ever played any games on a dual screen system, think about one that has an art style that you really like, and try to remember how they incorporated that art style into the user interface on the second screen. For me, of course, it's the Ace Attorney series. For some context, Ace Attorney is a visual novel series that debuted on the Game Boy Advance in Japan. Only the first game in the series was released on GBA. It was eventually ported to DS, which is where the series found its fan base. Ace Attorney has had more games come out on consoles with dual screens than single screens. These games are divided up into two sections. There are the investigations, which are in first-person perspective, and the trials, which are presented as more of a battle. In the first-person segments, you talk to people and investigate crime scenes, all handled on the touchscreen. It might not seem like much, but I really like how organized and professional the user interface in this game looks. If you were a real lawyer, I would imagine you would want to be organized and professional too. If someone tries to pull a fast one on the Ace Attorney, you can check the bottom screen for evidence and catch them in a lie, which is very satisfying to see their immediate reaction on the top screen, as opposed to waiting for the menu covering the entire screen to leave before they react. Since all of the decisions are being made on the bottom screen, I feel a sense of urgency because the top screen isn't covered with dialogue choices that break the immersion of the game. It feels like I have to make these decisions in real time, and I think that's perfect for a lawyer sim. Ace Attorney also has a great set of virtual buttons. Almost everything is clickable on the bottom screen. You can also navigate everything using the D-pad, but I personally prefer to just touch the screen. The Legend of Zelda is a series that, in my opinion, has been heightened by having dual screens. It's a series I will be bringing up a few times in this video. It's also a series that relies on item collection as well as map memorization, but also features puzzles and action elements. The Ocarina of Time has always felt limited by the hardware that it was on. On the N64, you had to deal with this blurry minimap on the bottom corner, and you'd have to open the menu to find anything. Also, you only had 3 buttons you could use for items, and whenever you wanted to change them, you'd have to go through the menu to do so. The N64 controller could only have so many buttons. Once a remaster was done for the 3DS, it also had a button limitation. Instead of just leaving it as is, they implemented virtual buttons on the touchpad, so you could have even more items at the ready. Not to mention dungeon navigation was vastly improved. All of your info is present on the bottom screen, and you can just drag items to which spot you want them whenever. Virtual buttons on a second screen touchpad are so nice. This is how we got awesome games like Osu, Elite Beat Agents, The World Ends With You, WarioWare Touched, and of course, all the mainline Pokemon games on dual screen systems opted to make the entire bottom screen buttons while you were in battle. Some of these games, like Tui, required you to use the touchpad when playing, whereas Pokemon games made it optional. Ultimately, it comes down to the gameplay experience the developers are trying to achieve, but I feel like giving players options on how to play is never a bad thing. Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Pugweenee, here with another emergency apology update. Earlier on in the video, I said this: there really is no downside to having dual screens. In reality, there are actually a few reasons why you might not want to have a dual screen setup. So here, please take a look at this section of the video where I go over the cons of that. Okay, so there are a few immediate downsides I can think of that relate to implementing dual screens. The first one being power consumption. Having two screens requires more energy, which means more battery. This is only really a problem with portability. I remember many nights trying to play Pikmin 3 on my Wii U with the gamepad plugged in because it would die after about 2 hours. The second more important downside is that dual screen integration requires additional work from developers. You can't just add a second screen to your game and expect it to just work. That would be no different than just having a wiki or a guide open on a second screen. Artists and developers would be expected to put in more work, and in an industry that relies heavily on crunch, I wouldn't want to put any additional workload on anyone. Bonus bad thing! Forced dual screen integration is easily one of the worst aspects of this setup. Mario Kart 8 and Super Mario 3D World are both fantastic games that a lot of people have played thanks to the Nintendo Switch. Originally, these games came out on the Wii U and had some of the worst second screen implementation I can think of. In Mario 3D World, you were seeing the same thing on both screens. The only difference is that you could touch some stuff and blow into the mic to move some platforms around. In Mario Kart 8, the main use on the second display was a giant button you could press to sound your horn, which does virtually nothing. Personally, I think there is a middle line that devs can toe where they don't underuse the second screen, but also don't rely on it too much, where it becomes invasive. I want to talk about a game that I consider to be one of the best implementations of dual screens, and it wasn't even originally designed to be used with them. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is one of my favorite games of all time. It received an updated remaster on the Wii U. It had numerous quality of life changes, and most of those were entirely due to the additional second screen. A lot of changes Ocarina of Time had are present during this remaster. The biggest downside being the Oblivion bloom filter they added. In Wind Waker, one of the main mechanics in that game is sailing for prolonged periods of time. While you were sailing on the GameCube, virtually you had nothing to do in the game until you got to your destination. In the Wii U version, you can check your map and manage your items while you sail, which is just a comfy little extra feature I love. Just like OOT 3D, dungeon navigation and item management are much better in this port. You can practically play the entire game without ever opening a menu on your main screen. The only time you ever have to is to pause when you feel like you gotta go do something IRL. I can't express enough how the addition of a second screen changed one of my favorite games into a much better experience. Whenever I want to play the Wind Waker, I always choose the Wii U version. Too bad it was on an unsuccessful console that's an absolute nightmare to set up. I'll let you in on a little secret. This game runs great on CMU, and you can add a saturation filter that returns the colors to the original. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. Also, if you have a dual monitor setup, you can play the game on one screen and have the gamepad screen on the other, and use your mouse to click around. Something that never ceased to amaze me was how creative some developers were with dual screens. One that comes to mind isn't even really a game, it's more like a lifestyle application, I guess. I'm talking about Brain Age Origins. I'm talking about Brain Age. Train your brain in minutes a day for Nintendo DS. Brain Age amplified its simple gameplay by having you, the brain trainer, do the simple act of holding your DS sideways like a little notebook. I bet subconsciously this tricked a lot of people into thinking they weren't really playing a game, since you were holding the console in a different way than what was intended. To be honest, holding the DS this way is pretty comfortable. I remember a few other games using the DS in notebook style. Specifically, one of the Mario and Luigi games featured a boss fight that was exclusively fought like this. Another famously creative instance of dual-screen gaming was in the Phantom Hourglass. In that game, you have to solve a puzzle by closing your DS to transfer something from one screen to another. This is very neat and I love it. I actually love it more than swapping the controller port to defeat Psycho Mantis if I'm being completely honest.
So, you used the other... I wasn't able to read the future.
A strong man doesn't need to read the future. He makes his own.
Phantom Hourglass wasn't the first game to try something like this, by the way. They actually borrowed this idea from another Nintendo DS game called Another Code: Two Memories. This series was called Trace Memory in North America, and it's actually getting a Switch remaster that's coming out soon. Since you can't bend the Switch screen unless you try really hard, I'm wondering how they will transfer this little bit of gameplay over to a new console. These are just a few small examples of how creativity was amplified on dual screens. Some other honorable mentions go to the Etrian Odyssey games, where you chart entire dungeon maps on the bottom screen, the Lifestyle Mama games, and how they incorporate whatever Mama is fixated on at the time into dual screen gameplay. And I'd feel bad if I didn't mention them, but Nintendogs and Cats are creative games in general, but their touchscreen implementation really bring them to a whole other level. As of today, there aren't any consoles or systems that rely on dual screens. The last real dual screen system released was the Wii U. I liked the Wii U, but not a lot of people did. I don't think this was the second screen's fault though. While I was researching dual screens for this video, I came across an article by The Verge. It was about this Nintendo DS emulation machine that will be coming out eventually in the future. It looks pretty cool. Unless new dual screen games are developed for this, the only games you'll be able to play are older DS and 3DS games and potentially Wii U games based on the specs given. I'm not complaining. Across all of those game libraries, there are literally hundreds of amazing games to try for the first time or to replay. Honestly, that alone makes me want to check one of these out whenever they release. Finally, I wanted to mention what I think conceptually is the next step forward for dual screen gaming, and that is VR. A lot of VR games have found creative ways to hide UI and make the overall gameplay experience simplified. A lot of people, myself included, don't want to play VR for more than like an hour or so at a time. If you're spending that time scrolling through menus, that subtracts a substantial amount of your limited playtime. A lot of VR games will just have you check your virtual wrist, where a HUD display will pop up and give you information at any time you need. This isn't a perfect solution, but it's getting there. Okay, time to shatter my own dreams. Do I think we will ever see a brand new mainstream console with integrated dual screen technology again? Absolutely not. I think that time has passed, and even if there are good reasons to adopt this setup, I think the financial aspects and potential to fail are the main reasons holding back large-scale companies from ever trying this again. A lot of great games have been coming out recently, and none of them needed a second screen to be successful. Do I think that some of them would have heavily benefited from having a second integrated screen? Absolutely. Am I worried that games will be worse without a second screen? Absolutely not. Before I end this video, I want to make a suggestion. If you are even on the fence about dual screen implementation, and if you have the time and the setup, just try playing Wind Waker on Cemu with dual screen monitors. I promise you, it'll change your mind. I think that Wind Waker will wind you over and wake pucker you up, welcome to the dual side. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you had as much fun watching this as I did making it. I have some other videos on screen you might like. Some are about games and others are about others. Subscribe if you haven't and let me know in the comments how you feel about dual screens. I'll see you in the next one.